So this will be the second installment in our Commander Focus series focusing on Davout. I've chosen for this episode a different type of battle. This is Krasnoi, however. Something interesting going on. If you can look at the French right off the bat, you should be able to tell something odd is afoot, and you'd be right. First off, all of these French 6 units, this is Davout, under Davout's command, are not facing towards the Russians. They're facing away, which means they are leaving the field, at least trying to get away. This is a bit lengthy as far as the historical background goes. I didn't read the historical background for the last one, but I feel like it's even more relevant to this scenario, so I'll go ahead and read it. It says the march from Moscow to Smolensk was a nightmare. Napoleon's army lost half of its remaining strength to a combination of starvation, exposure to harsh weather, Cossack and partisan raids, and desertion. Smolensk did indeed contain supplies. The Russian advances threatened to surround Napoleon. The retreat had to continue, and there was not sufficient transport to bring along the supplies. Not expecting an attack by the cautious Kutuzov, Napoleon marched out of Smolensk one corps at a time, resulting in a column some 40 miles long. Napoleon was attempting to regroup his forces at Krasnoi when Kutuzov's army did the unexpected, attacking and defeating Eugene's corps. Napoleon was in a dire position. His retreat path was blocked, and prudence dictated retreat, but he desired to stand long enough to give Davout and Ney's corps the opportunity to join him. Davout's corps did arrive, but was promptly bombarded and scattered. Ney's retreat route was cut when the Russians occupied Uvarovo, and Napoleon knew he was now heavily outnumbered, and if the Russians make a determined attack, all would be lost. So he did something he typically would do, and that is he gambled. He sent his old guard forward into the jaws of the Russian army to make an aggressive feint, while the young guard was to attack and retake Uvarovo. So great was the guard's reputation that Kutuzov canceled the planned attack and pulled back, choosing to bombard the guard at long range. General Bennigsen, second in command to Kutuzov, seeing the opportunity to destroy part of the French guard, ordered Galitzin to retake the village of Uvarovo. The young guard took heavy casualties from Russian artillery and repeated attacks, but held until nightfall. Napoleon recalled the guard and resumed the retreat, but the decision was not easy, for it meant leaving Ney's Third Corps to its fate. That is the history behind the scenario we will be playing when, I don't know, at some point. So for the particulars for this include I had planned on, so the last game we did by the book, that is to say, following the core commands and colors rules. I plan to amend that for this scenario and use something different. Not exactly sure what. We'll go into that in a second. But we're looking at 8 command cards for the Russian army and 6 command cards for the French army. Now, obviously, that reflects a bit of a bit more command. What am I trying to say? The Russians have a distinct advantage as far as command goes in that respect when you look at the numbers there. But you need to consider something. This is also going to be 7 victory banners like the last scenario. Now, here's what you need to consider regarding the command cards. So the Russian player loses 1 command card selected at random for each of Davout's line units that exit the battlefield. Now, again, these are your 6 units that are trying to exit the battlefield. For each one that does so, the Russian player loses 1 command card. So even though he has a command advantage over the French, that can change rapidly depending on how quickly we can usher troops off the field here. Davout's 6 line units each start the battle with 2 blocks. So that's another thing to consider. These line units usually start a game with 4 stands, but they'll be starting with 2 to represent losses and stragglers. And the French player gains 1 victory banner when 2 of Davout's line units exit, and then 1 victory banner for each successive line unit that exits. And let's see. The Russian player gains 1 victory banner for every 2 of Davout's line units eliminated. So right away, you can tell the focus of the battle is going to be this area here, even though we have all this other stuff to consider. The real meat of the matter is right in here. And then the village of Uvarovo, which is this right here, is the village of Uvarovo. And it states that is a temporary victory banner worth 2 banners for the side that occupies it at the start of the turn. And according to scenario setup, the Russians begin the turn in that town. So there's that. And let's see, the bridge itself is a temporary victory banner worth 1 banner for the Russian player at the start of his turn. So it shouldn't take long for them to get a banner for occupying the bridge. Both streams are fordable, both streams being these here, but they do not have any battle restrictions. And the typical rules apply to these. You can move onto the stream, but then you have to stop, and then you can move further once reactivated. Again, no pre-battle Mother Russia roll in this scenario. That usually happens, and it's a nice way to beef up Russian forces, but that does not take place in this scenario either. It didn't take place in the last one. Things to consider additionally, strategy and tactics. I haven't really gone over too much of how I want to do this other than move like hell to get off of there. But I mean, should I use the rear unit as blocking to let these guys move up and kind of clog the bridge, or I don't know, or just plan on getting all 6 units off as soon as possible? Obviously, we've got old guard here, here, and here, which can funnel up and towards the bridge to help seal off and create a blocking type of line as soon as these guys get about a hex away from the bridge. So there's that. We've got some young guard here. We have a significant portion of Russians on the Russian left flank that will, be heading obviously this way. So that means I need to have the French forces that are occupying the French right form a blocking line, something along that as well, to prevent flank attacks on the French Davout units that are trying to leave. Not too much going on the left here for either side. Only 1, 2, 3, 4 French units on the left, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, looks like 7 or so units on the Russian right. Shouldn't be a major factor or deciding factor as far as the battle goes, but we'll see. Now, as far as systems, because I have no lack of systems since I'm a tinkerer, of how to approach this, and I want to approach it in a conscious way such that I don't disadvantage or advantage either side, especially since there's such a distinct victory. I'm lost for words here. A victory getting these guys off of the board. I don't want to disadvantage either side in regard or respect to that. So typically, if it's just 2 sides going head to head, battling out, you don't have to consider too much as far as, again, tweaking things such that you mess it up. But with this, you got to be really careful because you don't want to allow the French forces to unrealistically or quickly get off the board any quicker than they typically would with the core system, or allow the Russians to move more rapidly than they would normally be able to do so to prevent that. So I feel like as long as we bear that in mind as a concern, we'll be okay. And again, whatever system I do use, it will be both sides adhering to it. So it's not like one side will have a necessarily clear and distinct advantage over the other, as both sides will be adhering to the system equally. So again, what system? It looks like we're not going to use the cards. That's what I'm leaning towards. This time we'll be using dice. and not sure if we will be assigning dice to sectors. So what I've decided is the 8 cards that the Russians start with will consist of 8 dice. That's what I'm leaning towards. And the 6 cards that the French would start with will consist of 6 dice. And that will turn into what will most likely be command rolls. So 8 dice looking for 5s or 6s, and then 6 dice for the French looking for 5s or 6s for command activations. And then you switch to unit activation phase after that command phase. And that typically allows all units to activate. So that's what I'm leaning towards. I've used it in the past, but all things are subject to change. I've also tinkered around with the idea of, and they mention in the expansion, generals, marshals, and tacticians, a number of new cards that were added, but they regard leaders activating units that are adjacent or contiguous up to a 3 hex length. So I'd considered that, but then that doesn't reflect, in my opinion, accurately the beginning command advantage the Russians have. Now, another thing to look at is on table commanders. We do have 3 French, but only 2, which is not very much. But that said, you only have 2 Russian commanders. So that's interesting as well. Anyway, there's things to consider, and all it does is make it a more interesting puzzle to solve. So I'm up to the task. Again, as far as the particulars and what I decide to do, we'll just have to wait until we start. Day and time to be yet considered, and I'll announce that, or I won't. I mean, I have a bad habit of just popping up and doing it, so we'll see. But that's what I'm thinking. We'll see if Davout can. I guess in this case, get as many of his folks out of here as possible, whilst not becoming a casualty himself. So we'll see how that goes. That's what I'm thinking, and that's where we're at. So, yeah, I think that's it. Keep it short and sweet. I'll talk to you guys soon, and we'll start the battle. All right. Take care.